Storytime with Skyhawk by Jill Lewis. 8th of May. 17.00 GMT. Nest site. Secret location, London. Iris spread her wings across the nest. The rain ran down her long flight feathers and soaked through the tangle of sticks to the dark rain-stained branches. The eggs were warm and dry beneath her, sheltered in their bed of moss and soft down feathers. The fibres of the tree creaked and groaned as the gale thrashed against it. Iris could feel the changing patterns of air around her and the pressure of the storm. Deep and hollow. Her bones and chest ached with it. She gripped her talons into the knot of sticks and pressed herself deeper against her clutch of eggs. One foot was still sore. She flinched at the memory of the humans holding her. They had touched her and unfurled her wings. The boy had looked deep into her eyes, and she had stared back, mapping the strange contours of his face. Now Iris sat tight in the eyrie, in the howling wind and hurting rain. The valley was humanless again. The acrid breath of their machine had long blown away across the hillside. Yet the boy remained in her memory. The boy who held her and eased her pain. He had given back her sky. Somewhere, deep inside her, Iris folded the landscape of his face into the mountains, skies and rivers of her soul. Chapter 15. I was glad when the summer holidays started. It meant I could spend most of the time with Iona at the loch. Rob and I had hardly spoken. I'd offered him £20 towards the bike computer that had broken in our fight, but he didn't take it. He said he wished he hadn't wasted his time picking a fight with a loser like me. I couldn't be bothered with him anyway. I did feel bad about Ewan though. Ewan asked if he could fish on our loch, like he did each summer, but I put him off with some poor excuses. I didn't want to risk anyone seeing the ospreys. So Iona and I went to the treehouse most days. Dad and Graham had finished the house with Hamish's help. Boards and planks of wood had been nailed together to build up the sides, and the roof was made from a piece of corrugated iron from an old pig pen. There were big drafty gaps we stuffed with sacking and tied with extra twine. Dad had put 2 stools next to the wide window with its wooden shutters that overlooked the loch and the mountains. He'd built a shelf and put in a big wooden trunk we used as a table and a store to keep our bird books and Iona's paints and notebooks. Graham camouflaged the sloping roof with old ivy and dead branches, so it was almost impossible to see from the outside. It was perfect. I hauled myself up through the trapdoor into the treehouse. "Did you remember the drawing pins?" said Iona. "Yeah," I said, "better still. I bought food as well. Mum made us some sandwiches. What do you want drawing pins for anyway?" Iona swept a hand around the treehouse. "We've got to decorate it," she said. "We need to make it ours." "With what?" I said. "I'm going to stick up some of the sketches I've done. Sketches of the ospreys." "Look," she said, handing me a wodge of drawings. This was when the chick was little. I looked at a drawing dated 19th of June. There was one scruffy chick sticking its head above the eyrie. It was only a couple of weeks old then. I remembered that day so clearly. It was the first time we actually got a glimpse of it. But we were also sad because we knew then that the other 2 eggs hadn't hatched. "I can't believe how much it's grown since then," I said. I pinned the picture up on the wooden walls of the treehouse, next to a later picture of the chick being fed by Iris. "And this is the one I've done today," said Iona. She held up a new painting dated the 2nd of August. It showed the chick stretching its wings. It was almost as big as its parents now, and there wasn't much room in the nest anymore when it flapped about. Its feathers were still a mottled cream and brown, and its eyes were deep amber, not yellow anymore. "Look," said Iona, pointing out of the window. "It's having another go." We sat looking out across the loch. The Eyrie was bright in the late morning sunshine. I reached into my bag for my binoculars. "I thought you said you brought sandwiches," said Iona. "I'm starving." I threw her a packet of sandwiches, propped my elbows on the window ledge, and focused my binoculars on the Eyrie. The chick stood on the edge of the Eyrie, flapping its huge wings, testing the wind. It lifted slightly off the nest, hovering just above it. We could hear the call of one of its parents in another tree, encouraging it to have another go. "Go on," whispered Iona, "you can do it." It dropped down onto the Eyrie again, standing right on the very edge. Then, as if it had made up its mind, it spread its wings and launched up into the air, followed by a downward plummet towards the loch. I held my breath. Just as the chick beat its wings, flapping hard, it swooped up from the loch and flew in a wide arc up above the trees. Round and round it flew above the woodland, flap, flap, flapping, with its big wings trying to keep airborne. We watched it try to land on a thin branch of a tree near the Eyrie, but the branch bowed and bent beneath it. It took off again, flapping towards the Eyrie this time. Its long, gangly legs were outstretched, and it wobbled in the air like a helicopter on a really windy day. It mistimed its landing, crashed into the nest, and then sat up, ruffling its feathers back into place. "Flying's the easy bit," I laughed. "It's the landing that's difficult." Iona smiled. "Time for a new picture," she said. She reached into the trunk for her box of art stuff. "Where'd you get all those paints?" I asked. She had more tins and pots than I'd ever seen her with before. "Mrs. Wicklow was cleaning out the art room and dropped them round for my birthday," she said. "I didn't know it was your birthday," I said. "Well, it's next week," said Iona, but I couldn't wait to use the paints. Iona found a new sheet of paper and started sketching. I glanced at the picture. I thought she'd do one of the chick's first flight, but instead she was drawing Iris on a tree on the other side of the loch. "Hamish thinks she'll set off to Africa soon," said Iona. I looked out across the loch where Iris sat in a tall dead tree. She was bright against the dark woodland. "Iris always sits on that far tree now, doesn't she?" I said. "I think she looks sad," said Iona. "She's a bird," I said. "How can she look sad?" Iona shrugged her shoulders and kept working at her picture. "She does to me," said Iona. "She knows she can't stay however much she wants to. She can't help. She'll leave her chick and go. She'll have to." I laughed. "She won't even think about that. She's a bird." Iona crumpled up a picture and flung it across the floor. I've lost where I am now. Iona crumpled up a picture and flung it across the floor. She stormed down the hatch and away from the treehouse. "Iona!" I called, but she'd already disappeared into the trees. I caught up with her by the river. She was sitting on a stone, hunched over, digging her penknife into something in her hand. "She'll be back, Iona," I said. Iona turned around. Tears streaked down her cheeks. "Will she?" The gold locket lay open in her palm. Deep scratches were cut into the photo of her mother's face. I sat down close beside her. "Your ma will come back for you too, Iona," I said. Iona snapped the locket shut and wiped the tears from her face. "No," she said. She shook her head. "She's never coming back for me." Chapter 16. I told Mum about Iona's birthday and she insisted on making a cake. I told her not to fuss, but a week later we were sitting around the kitchen table singing Iona happy birthday and watching her blow out the candles on her cake. "Did you make a wish?" said Mum. Iona nodded and cut the cake. The candles trailed their wisps of black smoke up into the air. "Can't tell you what it is or it won't come true," she said. She held up the first piece of cake. "Who wants some?"
Who wants some?
Hamish reached across the kitchen table. "I'll have a piece," he said, "in exchange for this." He handed Iona a parcel wrapped in shiny paper. "For me?" she said.
For me.
She tore the wrapping open, her eyes shining. Wow, a book on birds of prey. Thanks, Hamish. And we've got you a little something too, said Mum. Dad lifted out a large parcel from under the table. This is for you. We hope you like them. I've never had so many presents, said Iona. She unwrapped the parcel and opened the box inside. Thanks. I looked inside the box and I almost choked. Mum had bought Iona a pair of pink walking boots with purple laces. Ugh, they're really gross, I said. But Iona held the boots up, a huge grin on her face. I love them, she said. I really love them. Mum passed Iona some socks. These are for you too. Try the boots on, see if they fit. Iona pulled the socks on and slid her feet into the boots. They're perfect, she said. How did you know what size to get? Mum glanced at Dad and smiled. It was his idea, she said. He measured the footprints of your bare feet in the mud. Graham helped himself to a second piece of cake. Sorry, I didn't get you anything, Iona. Tell you what, I'll treat you to a rally drive around the farm on the back of the quad bike. No, you won't, snapped Mum. Graham shoved the cake in his mouth and winked at Iona. Still not very good at winking. Mum poured cups of tea and put some more cakes on the table. It's a shame your granddad couldn't come round as well. Iona nodded, prodding at the sticky crumbs on her plate with a finger. He had things to do. I knew she didn't want Mum asking questions. Why don't you try out your new boots? I said. Can I? Said Iona. Go on, smiled Dad. Why don't you and Callum go up the hill? I went to get my boots and followed Iona out into the yard. She was bouncing up and down on the spot, waiting for me. You don't really like them, do you? I said. They're pink. Iona walked on, balancing on hardened ridges of mud. Pink's my favourite colour. I frowned at her. You never said that. She laughed. Well, you never asked. I gave her a shove into a sticky mud puddle and ran ahead. Hey, watch it, she shouted. I don't want them getting dirty. We ran up the steepest part of the hill to the stone wall running along the top edge of the field. The sun was hot on our backs and we were out of breath when we reached the wall. Sheep were scattered across the ridge, dividing our farm from the valley beyond, with the lock and the ospreys. Iona licked a finger and tried to rub mud off the front of one boot. I wish it wasn't school next week, she said. Me too, I said. It would feel different back at school. I knew it would. It's only the middle of August, said Iona. When I was in London, the girls didn't go back until September. I picked up small stones and tried flinging them as far as I could down the hill. That's Scotland for you, I said. You know what we should do before we go back to school, said Iona. What? I turned to look at her. She had a huge grin on her face. I didn't know what was coming. Stay a night in the treehouse. Mum would never let me, I said. Don't tell her, said Iona. Grandad won't notice me gone. We'll both sneak out and we can meet there. I thought of sleeping in the treehouse, in the darkness with all the noises of the night around us, waking up and seeing the dawn. We'd talked about it before, but never seriously. Now it seemed like the best idea. All right, I said. This Saturday, you're on. Iona smiled. Don't come up till then, she said. I have to get something ready for then, a surprise. What? I said. She laughed. You'll just have to wait and see. I turned to head down the hill, but Iona called me back. Callum, she said. I looked at her. Today, she said, all of it. It's been the best. I grinned at her. Come on, I yelled. Ratio. So Callum and Iona's friendship has definitely blossomed, and we'll find out what happens next in the next instalment.